This morning on our week-long series, Confronting Colon Cancer, a love story. Colon cancer strikes about 150,000 Americans every year, and sadly, nearly 60,000 will die from it. Composer and musician Steve Tyrell and his wife Stephanie were among those thousands of people whose lives were shattered by this disease. Even so, their love lives on.
I look at you and there it is.
Steve and Stephanie Tyrell's love story was one you usually only read about in storybooks.
From the second I saw her, she just completely knocked me out.
They met 28 years ago while Steve was working in Texas as a music producer.
Stephanie came into our place, and she walked in and she saw gold records on the wall and stuff, and she said, "Oh, excuse me, I must be in the wrong place." And I said, "No, whoever you are definitely in the right place." It was love at first sight.
And it was a love that never faded. They married 2 years later and eventually began making beautiful music together.
I started teaching her how to write songs because she could write poetry. So I started showing her form in songwriting.
Their work included the hit song, How Do You Talk to an Angel, which they wrote together for the TV show, The Heights.
How do you talk to an angel?
Then Steve was asked to produce a soulful version of The Way You Look Tonight for the 1991 movie Father of the Bride. The producers ended up asking him to sing it himself.
With your smile so warm.
Stephanie kept after me to do it. She said, "You got a different sound on these songs. You should do it. We should do it." So my first album, A New Standard, was sort of like Stephanie and I's Sling Blade, and we started passing it around the film community, and the next thing I know, it was released, and it's been on the charts, I think, for 4 or 5 years now, and it started me into the world of the Great American Songbook.
The Tyrells had hit musical pay dirt, but their lives were about to unravel.
Steph was complaining for quite a while about back pain, and she kept going to a chiropractor, and it just never got better for a few months. And I finally said, "Why don't you go to a back doctor? Maybe you have a slipped disc or something." They took an x-ray, and they saw a lesion on her pelvis.
The news only got worse when they went to an oncologist.
When Stephanie was diagnosed, her cancer had already metastasized into her liver and into her spine and into her pelvis. At first, it was diagnosed as unknown primary, but as they got into it and did tests, they treated it as colon cancer. Her whole GI tract was completely devastated by this disease. We never talked about how are we going to get through it. We just chose to have a positive outlook on a horrible situation. She went through this with the same thing that she went through her whole life, with dignity and grace and poise and unbelievable courage. One of my all-time favorite photos of her, and it was in the hospital. Here's a woman who's terminally diagnosed, taking chemotherapy, which is devastating. A beautiful woman losing her hair, and yet she's blowing me a kiss.
At the same time, Steve and Stephanie were finishing their next Standards album together.
It gave us a chance to concentrate on music. She couldn't go into the studio anymore. So I would go to the studio and I'd do the takes. Then I'd come back to the hospital at night and we would play them in the room. All the other albums are about standards, but the last album, This Guy's in Love, it was coming from a little bit different place. And I was speaking to her through the songs. I wanted to say, "You see this guy's in love with you. Yes, I'm in love. Who looks at you
The way I do when you smile."
That's what I wanted to say to Stephanie. When the last chemotherapy didn't work, the doctor came to me and said, you really need to talk to your family. We don't think she's going to last very much longer, and you need to say your goodbyes. I went in and I talked to my son and both my daughters, and I was really felt the worst about Nick. He's 14 years old, and I told him, I said, "Man, you got a bad deal, 2 days later, she died. and she died in my arms. And I knew she was dying, and I picked her up and held her. I felt her spirit come right out of her body, and she relaxed. And she was not in pain anymore. You know, I'm gonna have a colonoscopy. I have to look at my health, you know, a little bit differently. You kind of always are a little bit afraid, you know, like what I don't know doesn't hurt me. Well, that's not true in medicine. I'm finding out.
5 months after her death, Steve and his 3 children try to live on with the same positive outlook they all had when Stephanie was alive.
I had 28 years with a woman that most people would kill to have 28 minutes with. I try to hang on to that. There's so much of her in our family and in all of our hearts and souls.
Steve Tyrell couldn't bring himself to perform for several months. But now, every time he sings the music he and Stephanie made together, it helps heal his broken heart.
Tell me now, is it so?
She's on stage with me. She pops into my mind when I sing songs. That's the only time I really feel right, is when I'm singing and I'm playing this music. Those moments are wonderful, and they're saving my life.
I need your love. I want your love.
For more information on our series, Confronting Colon Cancer, you can visit our website at today.msnbc.com. And a big thank you to Steve Tyrell for sharing such a personal story. And we'll be back after this.